Welcome to the Thinking Practitioner Podcast,
a podcast where we dig into the fascinating issues, conditions, and quandaries in the massage and manual therapy world today.
I'm Whitney Lowe.
And I'm Tel Luca.
Welcome to the Thinking Practitioner.
The Thinking Practitioner Podcast is supported by ABMP, Associated Bodywork and Massage Professionals. ABMP membership gives professional practitioners like you a package including individual liability insurance, free continuing education and quick reference apps, online scheduling and payments with Pocket Suite, and much more.
And ABMP's CE courses, podcast, and Massage and Bodywork magazine always feature expert voices and new perspectives in the profession, including Till and myself. Thinking Practitioner listeners can save on joining ABMP at abmp.com/thinking.
Are you ready to take your skills to another level? Come check us out at advanced-trainings.com. Whether you've been practicing for decades or are just starting out, Advanced Trainings offers a wide range of online and in-person programs designed to boost your effectiveness, deepen your understanding, and inspire your professional creativity. With innovative self-paced programs ranging from 1-hour certificate courses on the most common client complaints to our comprehensive CAMT certification program, we offer practice-changing learning events with industry-leading instructors and a supportive learning community that will take your work to another level. Plus, for a limited time, Thinking Practitioner listeners like you can enjoy a special offer. Sign up today at advanced-trainings.com and get a free month of our amazing AT subscription. Explore our extensive library of courses, cancel anytime, and keep your credits, all from just $20 a month, with the first month free for TTP listeners like you. Enter Thinking Subscriber at checkout for this limited time offer at advanced-trainings.com. Thank you. Hey, Whitney, how are you doing here?
I'm doing fine, sir. And how are you doing? And this is the beginning of 2024 when we are making this recording here. So we're looking forward to a new and exciting and innovative year at the Thinking Practitioner.
Beginning of the year, and we're going to take a little bit of time and look back on this past season. You and I were both surprised that it's the 4th season. We've done 4 of these full year seasons of the Thinking Practitioner.
Yeah.
That's like, we're up in 109 episodes now.
Mm-hmm.
And the purpose of our conversation today is to share our highlights, but also with the listeners, help you, the listener, get some gleanings, get some interesting points from our year of interviews with each other and with interesting guests, but also to give you some breadcrumbs to follow back into the season to see which topics you want to dig into further.
Absolutely. And, with this being the Thinking Practitioner, I tried to, as we were doing our reflections, really think about what of our episodes had really made me think a lot during this year. And there were certainly, there was a lot of them. It was hard to pick out some of the highlights because they were all things that made me think, I know in particular.
That's right. It made me think and also gave me tangible things to try and to do differently too. That's always my litmus test here.
Yeah. Yeah. So
practitioner being the second part of the title, we want to practice these things. We want to do them.
Yeah, that's right. Put it into practice for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, you've got some stats on where we are currently with this. Tell me
with the show itself, not to bore you with too many stats, but we're 4 years in, we're up to over 350,000 downloads, and that's still climbing. The number of listeners has been climbing every year. It's still climbing. About 70% of the listeners in the last year were in the USA, which leaves 30% for the rest of the world, mostly English-speaking countries, but a pretty broad variety. The other interesting statistic or feature is that you and I both started publishing these as YouTube episodes on our respective YouTube channels, and that's gotten a lot of response as well, too. It seems like a lot of people tune in via YouTube.
Yeah.
It's been a good year.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to the next one. Well, looking back again on these 20, whatever it was, episodes we did, 26 episodes in the last year, where do you want to start with? What's one of your highlights?
Well, I think, we both kind of put together a little bit of a list of some of the things that were influential for us. And I was interested to see when we came together with these lists, we had a couple of them. We decided to pick 5 each.
5 each.
Out of what was that total? Somewhere probably around 25 or so episodes. I didn't count exactly how many it was, but so we only got to talk about 1/5 of them. But I was interested to see that you and I had some crossover of similar ones that landed on both of our lists. One of the first ones was the one that we had done with Robert Schleip about fascial stiffness and pain. That was pretty interesting. And we got some interesting feedback from folks about that too, wanting to hear more, learn more about that.
That was episode 99, which we called Wait, What? Fascial Stiffness and Pain, because Robert Schleip, being the co-author of this study, talked about how their findings showed what we would not necessarily expect as body workers, that stiffer fascia was less painful, and that painfulness, at least in the plantar fascia, correlated with less stiff fascia. So that our very simplistic narrative of let's make things less stiff so they feel better didn't hold up in this case. And he shared some of the findings and some of the ideas around why that might be, and some maybe some more refined ways, more nuanced ways to think about what we're doing. Just this morning, I did get an update from him about that study. So in that same episode, he mentioned a depression study correlating fascial qualities with depression. And he says, as mentioned in that talk, we now have 2 larger clinical studies going on currently to explore fascial aspects involved in depression. Both of them have over 100 patients. I would expect the first reliable results in the spring of 2025. So that's been a really interesting topic. Some of the first that I know of research correlating tissue qualities with non-physical states, in this case, psychological or emotional states. He says in another good news, a radiologist from the university where he is, Ulm University, has developed a way to assess fascial tissues on inflammatory markers via conventional MRI scans. Dr. Slipe's quite excited by this possibility, and this may pave the path towards including reliable fascial tissue diagnosis into conventional orthopedic exams, such as in low back pain, tennis elbow, plantar fasciitis, etc. He's already started a collaboration with this clinician and this researcher to compare his assessments with our fascial stiffness assessment tools, and he includes a link about the press release on that. We'll put that in our show notes.
That sounds very significant. Yeah, very, especially being able to finally see something about soft tissue structure like that on an MRI, especially with fascial tissue.
And inflammatory activity, not just density, which is what MRIs traditionally show, but the inflammatory activity would be really interesting to see on a real life scan. And then the third piece of news from Dr. Schleip, in October, I got the position of a full professor here at Ulm University. In Germany, that's as much of a step upwards from PhD as a PhD is itself.
Mm-hmm.
So congratulations to Dr. Schleip. It's great to have your contributions in the field, and I'm glad you're getting to a place where having even more influence and contributions as we go forward.
Yeah, and we've had a couple of wonderful episodes with him, and hopefully we will get him back again to talk about some of these newer findings, because we certainly have, as we watch the download statistics, his talks are always ones that are very interesting for a lot of people, and because there's just such fascinating things that they're on the cutting edge of discovering and learning about there.
So more interesting things coming out of his group and his work. We'll watch for that in the coming years.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's on your list there?
The first one that went on my list was your conversation with Walt Fritz. That was episode 87, Shared Decision Making. And Walt's just an entertaining guy. I like listening to him. And I did a conversation with him too later that I enjoyed a lot. But the topic of shared decision making, it was gratifying that he even gives it a name, because this process of really deciding what to do or designing the session or with the client's input is a key one. It's close to my heart, and I know it's for a lot of people. The longer you work, the more you realize that's really makes the difference between effective work and just working on people.
Yeah,
and shooting the dice, as it were. It's like, how can we involve our clients in the decision making we do during the session, and even how we focus our session itself? He had a wonderful way of describing that process, and I really enjoyed your conversation with him.
Yeah, that was so fascinating to get into that, and that whole idea of how empowering it is to be working. It's basically like getting 2 people to do the job instead of 1 in a lot of instances. And he brought some really interesting insights. I always love sitting in on, and you mentioned too the other conversations that you had with Walt Fritz too in another episode, and there was some other great gems in those too, when you were doing the work with Walt and Ruth and some other things that you had talked about there. There's just, he's a wonderful resource. And I certainly would encourage people to go back, take a listen to those episodes, because anybody who's doing any kind of clinical work, there's always gems that come out of those discussions with him.
Well, his background as a PT and then as a teacher for a long time just comes through in his eloquent or articulate way of describing what he's up to and putting names to things in ways we can understand.
And he's just a wonderfully nice guy. He's a nice guy, good to listen to. So yeah, that was good. That was a good piece there.
All right. So what's one of yours? What do you
Well, let's looking through the list again, trying to think, what was impactful for me. The episode that I had done with Nicole Miller talking about working with veterans was one that I got a lot of insight into things that I just don't think about very much. This is a group of people who I don't do much work with, and that's one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to her and find out, kind of what's going on here, because it is certainly a group that can be tremendously impacted by a lot of things that we do with manual therapy. And there's such a need for addressing this. But there were so many fine points and subtleties about the experiences that veterans go through, the things that are necessary for practitioners to think about in terms of being prepared to work with some of these people who have had very serious trauma, obviously, psychological as well as physical traumas for many of them. And there are just, I think, so few intervention approaches that can be as powerful as what we're doing with a lot of the hands-on work. And so it was really inspiring to hear the wonderful work that Nicole has been doing with the Veterans Administration for many years and trying to work with a lot of these people here.
That was a great one. That was episode 84. And we got some good feedback on that. People really appreciated your conversation with her. And it made me reflect on how much trauma impact combat, war, combat danger, military danger has had on our country.
Yeah.
Because it's like we don't think of it as being on our soil necessarily, but there are so many people that are actively involved in that or have been in their lifetimes.
Yeah.
That it's like an invisible presence here right amongst us. And there's so much we can learn, so much I can learn by working with people that have been through those kinds of things or dealing with the effects of that apply to everybody.
Yeah,
so thank
absolutely.
you for bringing her in.
Yeah, she's done some wonderful work over the years. I would encourage people, anybody who's interested in learning some more about working with veterans, I would encourage you to go back, take a listen to that, because there are some really good resources that she brings forward in there as well.
And so, war is with us. Combat is with us, and the effects of trauma are with us. That's so present as ever in our world. So it's a great one to have a relationship to within ourselves.
Yeah. And next on the list, I noticed there was one that we both shared an interest in, and this is one that we actually got a lot of feedback about. Which one was this on your list next?
Episode 92, The Art of a Good Question. The Art of a Good Question, where you and I discussed that topic. What makes a good question in different topics? Why did it end up on your list? What do you like about it?
Well, because I love I have to say, this is one of the things that I love about doing this podcast with you is interesting questions that we get to ask people, but things that we ask each other, and the way that we think about the questions that we're trying to, that are the big questions we're trying to solve in the treatment room with clients or in our profession in general. What are some of those things, and how do we look at, what is the meat behind a lot of those things? And we came up with some interesting angles here, talking about both individually how we ask things of our clients, but also, how we're asking things of ourselves and what we're looking at, how we're learning processes are working in the stuff that we're doing as well.
That's how this got on my radar. We were doing these online study groups, and I saw some practitioners, some participants coming in with amazing questions that just launched us into the whole discussion for that whole period. And it started me asking, what is it that makes a good question, and how could I actually get better at that myself, both as a learner, but then also as a practitioner?
Yeah. I think so often in a lot of our traditional education, we kind of, the classroom questions are mainly just about getting information in there, but we have to always remember, I think now, what we're really trying to do is help build inquiring minds that are really looking into deeper things and asking some of the tough questions, like, what happens when what you're teaching us doesn't work? What do we do?
Yes,
how do we do these things, and how do we look at things differently, or what?
That's right.
These are all things, because the real life clinical environment is in fact messy. It doesn't follow follow those rules easily. So the better you can be at asking those questions and looking and finding those answers, I think the better for everybody involved.
Especially in those situations where there may not be a clear answer. Sometimes the right question is all you need
Yeah.
to open things up.
Right.
Great discussion.
Yeah. So
Okay,
that had
your
landed
turn.
as the next one on my list. So we'll
Yeah.
consider that we've done that. So tell me what's next
Oh,
on your list there.
Back to me. Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of curiosity, this is the episode we called Curious Souls. It was 96 with Aaron Alexander and Sue Hitzman.
Mm-hmm.
And we just talked. They are both high-profile podcasters in the health and fitness niche. And I enjoy both of them as people as well. And I thought, let's just get on and see where the conversation goes. And it went lots of places. We talked about lots of things, but mostly we talked about curiosity and how we learn and how we focus on what we give our attention to.
Yeah.
And it was just an enjoyable time with them. And also one of the ones that seemed to resonate and we got a lot of feedback about as well, too.
And this is what I find interesting too, is that, and people talk about this a lot of times with videos too. Like you might produce a whole series of videos and think like, oh, this one is gold. This is a great piece of content, and it goes nowhere, And then you like throw something together like, oh, somebody asked me this, I'll put this up there. And all of a sudden everybody's just looking at this. And I think I oftentimes am surprised at what it is that people really get the most out of or really want to hear more about. And that was a really good episode for broaching a lot of things that I wouldn't have necessarily thought to be landing on our radar screen frequently for a lot of listeners.
That's right. And one of the things they each do is they talk to people and their work addresses health in general. And you and I have narrowed our podcast to hands-on practitioners appropriately, and I love that. But it was great, again, to pick up a little higher above the fence that we've set up and say, like, okay, so how does this relate out into the bigger questions involved?
Which is always, I think, a valuable perspective in helping us break down those silos and look at how we can, reach out and connect with other people who are doing similar types of work or working with similar people and wanting to get results there. I think that's very, very helpful for them.
Okay. What's on your list next?
Let's see. Next on my list, of course, I had to put this back on the list. I know it was on my list last year. Our episode with Stuart McGill, and we had another one with him there this year. I just learned so much from him. Again, this gets me thinking about all kinds of stuff, and it has made me dive a lot deeper into a lot of his other work, his other writings and productions and things like that. And he's just such a brilliant clinician who's come at this big question of back pain from so many different angles and with some really interesting kinds of solutions for things. I am so in awe of his analytical capabilities for identifying a lot of these back pain problems. And I kind of consider it as, something that I aspire to try to get better at and, work towards in terms of being and sharing those clinical pearls.
He's dedicated his life's work to the puzzle of back pain. And he's largely retired, although he still does some interesting things. And it was very generous of him to come and spend some more time with us and talk through his lifetime of learning. He's also such an interesting guy to listen to and an unapologetic spokesman for the value of physics. He's, his background as an engineer says, no, sometimes it's just the way you do things. It's just the tissue.
Yeah.
Psychosocial stuff. Yeah, sure, maybe. But let's talk about physics. And just as a counterpoint, sometimes to the things that I get most interested in and spend my time with, I really appreciated his point of view as well, too.
Just as a side note to this, wasn't on the podcast, but this was a magazine article that came across my desk yesterday, I think it was. And I read it this morning before our podcast. It was about disc herniations and the article is essentially what causes disc herniations. And so I was like, okay, let's just see, was there anything new and different in here? And the author was talking a lot about, there've been kind of like different camps of focusing on causes of back pain from disc herniations, being mainly mechanical loading has been a big one. But one of the things that they brought up significantly was genetics. That, a lot of times it's not necessarily about loading and it's not necessarily about metabolic process or things like that. There are people who have a genetic predisposition to weakened discs, and that may be, a very simple thing that you might do that might seem completely innocuous leads to a really serious kind of injury like that. And it's not because of excessive loading. It's not because of excessive heavy lifting, but genetics is a factor. And we can't really, evaluate those factors of genetics, but it's something I think as a clinician, really important to remember that a lot of times there's no one single answer for so many of these things. There's really a lot of different things that might be potentially at play there.
Mm-hmm. And then the puzzle that genetics presents us around, if it is genetic, if it is just something that runs in our family line, is that fate? Is that something that we're necessarily going to have? And if we do have it, does that mean we just stuck with it? Or are there things we can do as hands-on practitioners to help? And my bias is there always are. There always seems to be things we can do because genetics, determines, you could say, or influences a lot of the probabilities for things, but the possibilities, the other side of the coin, the possibilities of how we live and what we do is up to us and up to the inputs we have during our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're interested in back pain at all, and my guess is lots of folks are because lots of clients have these issues, go back and take a listen. Great episode number 97 with Stuart McGill. What's next on your list? I think
well, I'm down to my last one. We've covered them all.
That's right. We did actually talk about the other next one we shared in common was the fascial stiffness one. So what's the next one or last one you got
Number
on the list?
Number 5 on my list was my conversation with Dr. Peter Levine. It was episode 108, the most recent episode, where, again, he kindly took time to just meet and talk and reflect on his background. If you don't know him, Peter Levine published a book in the 90s called Waking the Tiger, I believe. I don't have it here on my desk anymore, but that turned around the trauma world in many places from being say an intractable brain condition to being a condition that involves the whole body and brain and somatic responses. And much of today's trauma work in all kinds of fields, including with veterans, is strongly influenced by the directions he started us on and being furthered and of course popularized people like Besser van der Kolk and Robert Scher, people who have taken this idea of the trauma as a body response and elaborated on that. So us as body therapists get some relevance from his teachings and from his writings. And what a lot of people don't realize was that he began his career as a hands-on therapist. Early in his career, he studied with Ida Rolf, so he and I got to tell stories about that, talk about that, and I got to pick his brain a bit on how that experience led to the trauma work he does now. And then what's most important for us as hands-on practitioners to be able to recognize and how do we respond to clients who may be dealing with unresolved trauma.
Yeah.
It's a great conversation.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And the other, a couple other things that it really made me think about a lot there too, is I was kind of reflecting back on some of the stuff, when I was originally in massage school, and this was the late 1980s, 1987-ish, something like that. It was kind of a trendy, popular thing to begin looking at a lot of these issues around trauma and psychological impacts of things in people's lives. And some of the practitioners of that time were really, I think, grossly simplifying things. And, people were coming out and saying, the reason your elbow hurts is because you've got anger at your father stored in your elbow, kind of things.
Oh, that's your jaw. That's your jaw. Your
jaw. That's right. Okay. Yeah. So what's the elbow one? That's your elbow? Uncle or something?
Maybe. Okay.
Yeah. But, I think a lot of his work, Dr. Levine's work and the things that he had really brought about, helps us see some of the much bigger pictures of things that are going on here, and that things are not just as simple as that, that they really are very vast in terms of how they may impact people.
That's right. Not as simple as that, but still very tangible in the sense that it's what happens when we're traumatized is we dissociate. Mm-hmm. We split off from our experience. And the way back, the way to help with the ongoing effects of trauma is to reassociate, to get back into our bodies. Mm-hmm. And that's been his eloquent touch point for all the decades he's been teaching.
Yeah.
And brought us some really tangible ways to help with that.
And he's one of those people that you can look at him and his decades of work and look at just a tree of people who have been influenced by him and who he has had profound effect on, and just see a remarkable, vast expanse of impact that he has had on so many people in a lot of different areas.
I was embarrassed. I was like a broken record. He kept, saying these simple and clear ideas. And I realized, oh, that was you that helped me articulate that, back in my since 40 years that I've known him and been learning from him as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So a wonderful discussion there with him. Yeah.
Well, you have one more on your list.
Yeah, I've got one more on my list. This was an interesting discussion that I had with Les Sweeney, the president of ABMP, where we were talking about the recent survey that they had done. They do this survey every few years on the state of the profession and what's going on. And I sometimes get to be a little bit of an data analytics geek, and like looking at numbers about things and see what kind of story those numbers tell. And there were some real interesting things that we talked about in terms of how things have shifted and changed in the profession. And for me, also trying to kind of like think about how does that impact not only me and my business and the things that I'm doing, but how does that really impact the whole experience of manual therapy for the clients and the people that are out there receiving it? And what is this going to mean for the future? Like, one of the things that he said in there that was really resonated with me, that I was just kind of like, wow, I got to think about, what does this mean? He was talking about how when they first started doing these surveys in the mid to the late 90s, I think it was when they got started with them, he would go around to schools and ask the students questions. These are mostly obviously massage therapy schools. He was asking the students, how many of you plan to go into your own business, and how many of you plan to go work for somebody or something like that? And usually at that time, he said like 80 to 90% of the hands were raised when people were going to start their own business. And he said now it is completely flip-flopped, that he goes around, asks that same question to the schools, and like 80 to 90% of the people are planning to go work for somebody. And that might be a franchise operation, or it might be a health clinic or a spa somewhere or something like that. But they're looking at massage as an employee-centered job that they will go get when they exit the field. And I just think that's a really profound change in our field, and curious how it will play out in the years to come.
That's right. That's makes me think of other professions where that is the way in. I'm just thinking of physical therapy, for example. Most all physical therapists work in a clinic, work for somebody else at first, and then many of them aspire to be off on their own in private practice. So maybe there'll be an evolution.
It may be
this. Who knows?
Transition evolution thing, something just very much like that. Yeah, but it is particularly interesting to watch some of those different trends. And we talked a lot about like the school closings that were impacted by COVID, and some of the other, just the overall shrinking of the training programs, the number of programs in the school, which is in this country at least, which has gone way down since its peak around 2008 so. I think I'm got on my soapbox a little bit about saying, I think that we've really kind of needed that contraction, because I do think we had a very large number of schools that were populated by teachers who didn't have a lot of really good experience teaching, and that has all kinds of impacts going out into the profession as well. So
the massage graduate boom peaked, even though, and there's different contractures along the way, like you talked about, but even though the overall number of active practitioners continues to gradually rise over time. I don't know what happened during COVID, honestly. I don't know about that, but I think that it's the lines I know about outside of that time period, there's been a steady rise in the number of active practitioners.
Yeah. And I think the demand is still there very high for these services from the public. And now that it's become more popular and people are a lot more aware of it, there is absolutely a greater demand for it. And it will be interesting to see how those two things converge in the years ahead.
There's certainly exceptions, I think, but in general, I hear in the little snapshot of practitioners that I have direct interaction with about how busy they are, about how their problems are. How do I manage not being able to serve everybody I would like to? Or how do I take care of myself? And I think they tend to be practitioners that have been working for quite a while. And I know that there are exceptions, places where it still might be challenging to have the practice you want, even as an experienced practitioner. But I think there's so much demand out there in general for what we do, and it's only increasing.
And just to put a plug in for being good, the better you are at really bettering yourself and trying to serve your clients better, those are the people who are the busiest. They are the people who clients are really wanting to see, those people who are digging in and trying to serve their clients in as many ways as possible. I think that's kind of the recipe for being successful for a lot of folks.
And then the people that deal with busyness the best are also the learners, the people that are willing to find out how to be more specific, more intelligent, more focused, more intentional about what they're doing. That's how we survive. That's how we get sustainability. Once you're good, once you got the people, then you survive by being even better.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that note, I would say, our goal, at least me, I'll sort of talk about me personally, but our goal for this upcoming year is to continue sharing as much content with you, the listeners, as possible about things that will help make you think some more. We have some interesting folks coming up. We've got some interesting folks coming up on our list of guests that we're having. Who else is on our list?
It's going to be pretty soon, after this episode, but you're going to talk to Rajam from the San Diego Pain Summit. Rajam, how do you say her last name? Rose?
Rajam Roos.
Rajam Roos. So that's been an ongoing fixture in our profession for a while, that event that she coordinates. So I'll be interested to hear your conversation with her. Gil Headley's going to join us to give us a peek into his nerve tour process. And you and I each got to go be part of the audience there. So it'll be fun to now talk on the other side of the mic with him.
Yeah.
Get that conversation. I have a date with Peggy Haran, who is one of the senior practitioners at the Esalen Institute and been there since the 70s.
Wow. And that's going to be interesting. Yeah.
She's a wonderful person, and I've known her for many decades. And I'm really looking forward to catching back up with her because she's a lineage holder in that she remembers the place that Esalen and Esalen massage held in popularizing massage in the culture in general.
Yeah.
In many ways, there are many seeds that sprouted out of the work she and her colleagues were doing there in the 70s. And so she's got some great perspectives on that process.
Yeah. And for a lot of people who, maybe the history of massage and soft tissue work was just an academic thing in massage school that you just had to listen to in order to pass your class, these things influence a lot of where things have come from and where we are currently. And I do think it is always valuable to have a good perspective on the history. And so I really look forward to hearing what she has to say there.
Important thread in the lineage for all of us, me in particular, so I'll look forward to that one.
Yeah.
And then if we can find a date to get him in, Eric Dalton wants to come in. That'll be fun to finally get him behind the mic.
Yeah, we've been trying to do that for a while. So we'll look forward to doing that, having a good chat there. So, and as always, let us know what we can do for you, the listeners. What do you want to hear more about? What can we do to help provide you great content throughout the next year? We always appreciate your input, emails that you send us, comments that you send us, etc. But do let us know what you want to learn more about, what you want to hear us talk about, and we'll try to squeeze it onto the list for this coming year as well.
As well as follow-up questions or thoughts for our guests. Those are always stimulating too.
Yeah.
To hear your reactions, thoughts, questions, and ponderings, experiences around the topics our guests are talking about. Love getting those as well.
Yeah. Wonderful. All right.
We'll put a list of the links to these episodes on our website. Maybe I'll slip in our biggest downloads of all time too. I'll put that list in there. Our greatest hits forever, not just this fourth season.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds good.
Who's our closing sponsor?
Yes. And so Books of Discovery, and we want to thank them again so much for their continual support ever since the very beginning with us. So Books of Discovery has been a part of the massage and bodywork world for over 25 years. Nearly 3,000 schools around the globe teach with their textbooks, e-textbooks, and digital resources. And Books of Discovery likes to say learning adventures start here, and they find that same spirit here on the Thinking Practitioner Podcast and are proud to support our work, knowing we share the mission to bring the massage and bodywork community thought-provoking and enlivening content that advances our profession.
Here's how I got connected to them. Instructors of manual therapy education programs can request complimentary copies of Books of Discovery's textbooks for review or use in their programs. That's how, again, they sent me some review copies way back in the 90s, I believe it was. And I was like, these are cool. I'm going to start using these.
Yeah.
So reach out to them. They still do that. Reach out to them at booksofdiscovery.com. And you, a listener, whether or not you're a teacher, can explore their collection of learning resources for anatomy, pathology, kinesiology, physiology, ethics, and business mastery at booksofdiscovery.com, where you, as a Thinking Practitioner listener, can save 15% by entering Thinking at checkout.
So thanks to all of our listeners and to our sponsors. We appreciate you hanging out with us here and stopping by and sharing some of your ear time in the world with us. You can stop by our sites for the video, show notes, transcripts, and any extras. You can find that over on my site at academyofclinicalmassage.com. Until where can they find that for you?
Advanced-trainings.com. If you have questions, comments, or things you'd like to hear us talk about, as we said, do email us or just record a short voice memo on your phone, and it's easy to email it to us. It'd be fun to hear your voice and might even play it on the air if you want. Email that to info@thethinkingpractitioner.com. Look for us on social media under our names. I am Till Luca. Who are you?
Today, I am Whitney Lowe, and we'll probably be that tomorrow. So you can check us out over there on social. You can rate us on the Apple Podcast, as it does help other people find the show. That is actually quite important, so we encourage you to do that. And you can hear us on Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, Google. What is it now? It's YouTube Music. Google Podcasts is going away this year. It's now YouTube Music. So
there you go.
Wherever you happen to listen. And please do share the word and tell a friend, and we'll look forward to sharing with you again.
Here we go on another season. Thank you, Whitney.
All right. Thank you.